All right, good morning, everybody. As you can see, I'm not here today, so we're going to be starting off Unit 4 from a video rather than doing it in person like I'd hoped. So hopefully everything that you need for this is here, and you'll be able to make it through our lesson today without any problems. It's not overly complicated, but there are a few things that you're going to need to get in order to be successful in this lesson that we haven't talked about before. So first things first, you need to go ahead and get your drafting kits out and your workbook. And in addition to that, you need to come up to the front of the classroom here, and you're going to need a T-square, which is one of these tools that are hanging directly below the flag. You're going to need one of the drafting boards, which is down here in the cabinet below. Sorry, the camera on my Mac is trying to keep me in frame. So you need the boards down here. You're also going to need about 4 inches of the blue tape that's in this dispenser here. And then just around the corner is a tray that is holding some title block material. You'll need 1 sheet of this and 1 sheet of blank paper from the desk. Actually, it'll be sitting on that same cabinet. So, quick rundown of the things that you need. You need your drafting kit, you need your manual, you need a piece of title block paper and a piece of blank paper. You're also going to need a T-square and a drafting board and about 4 inches of the blue tape. So, alright, so we're going to dive right in here and start taking a look at our work for today. Let's see here. If you don't want or can't find the printed copy of your workbook, do remember it is available on Canvas for you as a digital download. Let's see here. I want that. There we go. In here where we're working today is going to be starting essentially at page 29. I apologize. I clicked the wrong place. There we go. Essentially at page 29, we are starting section 4 today, which is our basic drafting unit. So the first time we're using the tools to create our assignments. We are starting with lab 5, even though it says lab 6. Lab 5 is creating our title block on paper for the first time. So before we do that though, let's talk about setup for our assignments. This is something that you're going to need to make sure you, there we go. You're going to need to make sure that you internalize, because every assignment from here on out is going to follow some of these same procedures. Basically, we're going to start off with what we're doing today, technical setup, which is setting up your drafting board and equipment so that you can be successful when you complete your assignments. And then we're going to start the process of instrument mastery, or learning how to use the drafting tools accurately and repeatably. Let's take a look at some of the things. The first thing I said is drafting board. It's one of the new tools that you haven't handled before that you should have in front of you now. Yours looks a little different than this picture. It should just be a plain white board with a black border. Some of them have markings on them. Some of them might have some tape residue on them. That's fine. It doesn't really impact it. Unfortunately, we no longer have the type of boards that are in the picture, as they were handled improperly by previous classes, so we must use slightly different equipment. The picture on this on the slide is terrible because it just looks like we've got a ruler, but in fact we are looking at a T-square. A T-square is a drafting instrument consisting of a long straight edge called the blade, and it is attached at right angles to a shorter cross piece called the head. Let me switch over to the document camera so you can see the one that's in front of me. So this is the T-square that I have grabbed. We have some others that don't have measurements on them. I want to say this up front and be very clear. While there are measurements on the T-square, and sometimes they can be useful, most often the measurements on the T-square are not helpful. The reasoning for that will become clear when we start laying out things on our title blocks. But for the time being, just know that if you grab one of the T-squares that doesn't have measurements on it, you are in no way at a disadvantage from somebody who has a T-square with measurements on them. All right, so this is the T-square. Switch back to full screen Chrome. There we go. All right, so the law of alignment, or rather the idea that everything should be perpendicular to the paper that you're drawing on. Essentially, alignment is the state of being precisely parallel or perpendicular to a referenced edge of the board. The board that I am using, the board that you are using, is perfectly 90 degrees at the corners, perfectly flat along the short edges, and flat along the long edges. You want to make sure that this is the case on any type of drafting that you're going to do where, I don't know, I'm talking myself in a loop here. Long story short, make sure it's nice and smooth and that your T-square rides along the edge of the drafting board in a nice, smooth manner. This is key to making sure that your drawings turn out correctly. We have our tri-scale, which we have talked about before when we were talking about measurement, and our drafting tools. We have our 30, 60, 90 triangle. We have our 45-degree triangle. We aren't going to use it today, but we do have compasses. We have our lead holder or mechanical pencil, if that's what you're choosing to use. An erasing shield. And then, yes, okay, so that brings us to the tools. So those are the tools that we're going to need for today. If you missed that list, it is the drafting board and a T-square, your 30, 60, 90 triangle, 45-degree triangle, your scale, pencil or lead holder, erasing shield, and they didn't mention it earlier, but an eraser as well. We want to make sure that as we are continuing to go through our drawings, that we maintain a clean work area, and that even as we erase things, we keep the erasing shavings and extra graphite dust away from our drawing. A clean drawing is a more effective drawing. All right, so let's jump into actually taking a look. So on here are our tools. We've got the triangles, scale, eraser, T-square, lead holder, erasing shield, and the drafting board itself, which is just too big to fit on the screen at the moment. All right. Oh yeah, and then we also have our tape, which you may be wondering, why do we have the tape? Well, I'm about to tell you. So first things first, set the title block paper to the side. We're going to use that on the next assignment. And grab your blank piece of paper. We want to go ahead and clean off our drafting board, make sure we don't have anything on it. Keep everything nearby. Everything except your T-square. So, one of the most important things that you can do as a draftsman is keep your T-square properly affixed to the side of your drafting board. It's kind of hard to see here. Can't really move it over without knocking my computer off the desk. But you want to make sure that there is never a gap between the edge of your drafting board and your T-square. If there is, what is going on with my video feed? Hello, little friend. What's going on? Be right back. That was weird. Okay, sorry about that. We want to make sure that our T-square always stays nice and tight against the edge of the drafting board. If we don't do this, then it's going to throw everything else about our drawing off from here. Wow, even my personal camera is not working now, which I guess you don't really need to see my face moving. But there we go. There we go. Everybody's working again. We want to make sure this is nice and tight against the point. This gives us a straight line that's parallel with the edges of our drafting boards. And also with the next step that we're going to do, which is to attach our paper to the drafting board. I'm sure you've heard me mention at times that when we were drawing and sketching and able to move the paper around, that wasn't always going to be the case. And that's what we're going to do now. So you're going to take your about 4 inches of blue tape, you're going to tear it in half so you have 2 short pieces, and you're going to take one side and tear it at half, and tear it at half again. So you should have, by the time you're done, 4 short pieces and then about another half that we're going to use later. So what you need to do is make sure that, I can't be more clear about this, make sure the T-square is tight against the edge of your board. Press down a little bit in the center, and then we're going to take our paper and we're going to move it so that it is touching the T-square but not going under it. And once you're there, you're going to take some of your small pieces of tape, make sure it's perfectly flat, and you're going to tape the corners. You're not going to cover it very far. You just want to be able to hold your paper in place so it doesn't move around as we're drafting. It's kind of hard to see on my board, but here's the edges of my paper. And you can see my 4 corners have been taped down. This one's probably a little bit too far in. We're going to run into my title block. Or my, not title block, border. Alright, so once you have that in place, the next step is to grab your scale. Make sure that we are looking at the side that has a 16 in the upper left-hand corner. Rotate it around or flip it as need be to get this. Remember, this is our normal ruler. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure in about 1/4 of an inch on all sides of our paper. So remember, you put 0 at the edge of the paper, come over to our 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to make a mark. And I'm going to do this on both sides, and then I'm going to take my 45-degree triangle because it's handy. I'm going to again make sure my T-square is nice and tight against the side of my paper. I'm going to align my triangle so that it's resting on the blade of the T-square, just like that. And then I'm going to come up here and make a mark, 1/4 of an inch up from the edge of my paper. I burned an inch on this. We talked about that before. I'm going to do the same thing for the top here. Slide this up. Make sure my T-square is nice and tight against the fence of my, or the side of my board. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. So here, I'm going to just set the 6-inch mark on the edge of my paper. And then come down 1/4 of an inch and make a mark. So I know I have 4 marks, right? But you're asking yourself, how do I make those into the lines of my title block? Well, when you only have 1 mark and your paper has been taped down properly, you can simply put your pencil on said mark, just like with our vanishing point, slide our scale up to it, and then draw that line. I'm going to do the same thing up here at the top. Hopefully your desk is a little less cluttered than mine, so it's a little bit easier. Alright, so we've got the top and the bottom line. I'm going to take my 45-degree triangle because it's taller, or my 30, 60, 90 triangle because it's taller. I'm going to do the same thing with it. T-square, tight against the side of the board. Oh, there we go. Triangle against the blade of my T-square. And then I'm going to connect the 2 lines. I'm making sure to press down on both the T-square and the triangle so they don't slide around. If you're using the blue triangle, not the smoky gray one that I am, you should be able to just flip it over and go the other direction. Like just flip the triangle over without having to move it over like this. But these Westcott ones and the ones with measurements on them have a definitive flat edge. So you really don't want to try and draw on the other side or it's not going to be as accurate. Okay. So I now have my perfectly spaced and perfectly straight title block border. I'm now going to grab my erasing shield. This will be the first time you guys are using this. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom in on this as best I can. It's a little better. I'm going to take my erasing shield and I'm going to set it so that it's over the corner up here at the top. And essentially covering the parts I want to keep and erasing over the shield for the parts that I don't. I'm going to do this for all four corners. Now, in order to see a little better on the camera and on the video, I pressed a lot harder when I was drawing the lines than I probably would have otherwise, which means my erased lines are not as erased as they probably should be. Hopefully, since you're drawing lighter lines than I am, or you should be, that's a little bit easier to take care of. Now that I've got my bottom done, I'm going to put my title block in. So just as before, T-square, tight against the side of the board. Line up my measurement. In this case, I'm burning an inch again. Put a mark at a quarter. And just like before, pencil and draw. Oops. Now my finger got in the way there. And you can see I made a little bump there that I didn't mean to. But unlike Bob Ross and his oil paints, not all mistakes are happy little accidents, and they're easy to fix with an eraser. All right. Once you have that done, same setup as we've been doing for the last several assignments. You're going to go first initial, last name over here on the side. All right, so technically this is Lab 5, but let's go ahead and write Lab 6 in this section right here, because we're going to use the title block we just created for Lab 5 for Lab 6. Okay, don't forget to put your class right here. And don't forget to put the date. In this case, it's going to be, what, February 1st, I think is the answer? February 2nd. That's going to be 2/26. All right, so this takes care of Lab 5. At this point, ordinarily, I would have you take a picture of this and turn this in for the Lab 5 assignment. However, that would involve taking your paper off the board to hold up in front of your camera. And I don't want you doing that since we've got it all nice and tight against the board. So you're going to, and I know this is annoying, but you're going to take the picture when you finish Lab 6. There you go. 6, and you're going to turn that picture in for both Labs 5 and 6. Make sure you turn it in for both. Otherwise, it's going to automatically mark you as a 0 on one or the other. All right, so we've got Lab 5 taken care of. Well, here, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. That way I can attach this simply to Lab 5, and then we'll move on to Lab 6.